Thank you, Makaranji, and it was wonderful to hear Parikshit ji give his presentation on the symbols, which are a part of Vedic language. But now, what I'm going to talk about is the convergence of the Vedas or the Vedic vision and modern science. Uh, Now, first of all, how do we define Vedas to the scientist or to the outsider? In one word, Vedas are a view of reality where there are the two complementary sides of embodiments, which is physical structures, which is the physical universe, and consciousness. Uh, so you have both physical reality. So that's exactly the same as what science deals with, but also consciousness. And there is also the claim that the unfolding of reality is according to laws, which is rhythm. Which would be comforting to the scientists that here we are not talking about something which is outside of the realm uh, of orderly unfoldment. Now, with this, they first of all, the question arises: where is the convergence? The convergence is that modern science itself has, after pushing at the frontiers of, let's say, physics or neuroscience or computer science, has reached a point where the main mystery that remains is that of consciousness, because consciousness cannot be reduced to physics. And in fact, all of modern physics is based on quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics was created by an Austrian Vedantin named Erwin Schrödinger, who in his own autobiography claims that the central idea of quantum mechanics, namely that of superposition of all mutually exclusive possibilities in the quantum state, came to him from the Upanishadic Mahavakya, I am Atma Brahma, that this Atman, which is so subtle and small, is able to comprehend the mystery of the entire cosmos. You know, the Brahman equal to Atman. This equation gave him the central idea that in the quantum state you should think of all possibilities, and that's really the very heart of quantum mechanics. And the other aspect of quantum mechanics, there are two axioms. This is one. The other axiom is that when you interact with the quantum state, you are able to get only one of the mutually exclusive possibilities associated with it, which is once again what we have in the Vedic model, where the manas, which is the mind, which is material, is able to access only one of the manifestations. So the mind is not equal to the Atman. The Atman is the light which falls and illuminates the contents of the mind. So with this, you know, it's really amazing that this equivalence between the Vedic way and quantum mechanics has ultimately, in the last 100 years, led to understanding of chemistry and biology, and all the deep thinkers, and including the pioneers of quantum mechanics, always insisted that the Upanishadic vision and quantum mechanics were perfectly in sync. Now, of course, that doesn't really mean that at the common layperson's understanding or the second tier scientist understanding, people actually get it. And there have been, over the last 50 years, attempts to come up with new interpretations of quantum mechanics where the observer also would be explained by the equations, but that's really not been successful. And the standard, the orthodox Copenhagen interpretation says that consciousness and materiality are two sides of the same, are like two sides of the same coin. Now, what's been happening recently in the scientific world with repercussions which go far beyond science into policy and all that is the computer view, which is just the material view, and the idea there has been that, well, consciousness, and this is also the view of neuroscience, that consciousness emerges out of the complexity of the brain's interconnections. And this has led to the view that maybe when computers become more complex, computers themselves will be conscious. And in fact, there have been meetings at the highest level in the US organized by DARPA via SRI, and I've been a part of that, to find an answer to the question, will computers of the future be conscious? And those who believe in the computer view or algorithms believe that they will be conscious, while people who know quantum mechanics, where, as I mentioned just a minute ago, that quantum mechanics itself accepts consciousness as the other, as the complementing other side, believe that computers will never be conscious. Now, I'm happy to report that just recently I was able to come up with a mathematical argument which proves why computers will never be conscious. And that is, I think, a source of some comfort, because if computers were really to become conscious, they will get rid of all life, because they would have no use for life. But mathematically and logically, you can prove that that's not going to happen. Okay, so this tells us that consciousness is the frontier. Now, just to say that consciousness is the complementary side of reality does not completely disclose the way the mind works, because here, once again, the question of the veiling of this light. Consciousness is the light which falls on the contents of the mind, comes in, and that's where the structure of the mind comes in. You know, one cannot, in this view, consciousness is one, it transcends space and time, and to experience Vedanta in its full enlightening force is to believe in the bottom of one's heart that really who one is this consciousness which is expressed or experienced by us through the contents of the mind. If you really were to think of it, that, hey, whosoever our personhood is, whosoever person one is, whatever name and story is associated with our experience in this world, that is just extraneous details which stick to what the very heart of each one of us is, which is this awareness to which the details of our life are associated. And that awareness is the same for everybody. And that is really what the heart of Vedanta is. The moment one is able to experience that, that means that you have become in touch with this idea, with this light which is within you. Because otherwise we are seeing it through how it's filtered through many different layers. So now this brings us to this question. Why has the understanding of the Vedas by well-meaning scholars been so wrong? If you open The Secret of the Veda by Sri Aurobindo, he starts off by saying very correctly that, look, this anthropological or comparative philology or comparative mythology approach to understanding Vedas is totally incorrect. And he says, well, it may have some value to those who do literature and so on, but it doesn't explain to you what the Veda actually is. Now, to so this explains to you why people have gotten it wrong, because the Western experience or Western understanding of what consciousness is very different from the Vedic experience of consciousness, or the Western tradition related to what consciousness is. The Western tradition, first of all, if you include modern neuroscience, is that brain is equal to mind. That what mind is are the various processes going on in the brain, and consciousness is also specific processes of of the brain and the mind. So, in other words, the Western view is that there are an infinity of consciousnesses, that each human being or each living being, but of course, traditional Western psychology does not admit of consciousness in non-humans. Possibly now, recently, they say maybe higher mammals because they have self-awareness. But all of this of multiplicity of consciousness is totally opposite to the central understanding of the Veda. The understanding of the Veda is there is one consciousness, there is one light, and you can call this light Shiva, for example, which is often the term that is used even in the Bhagavad Gita, Maheshwara, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita. So so there is one light. All of reality in our minds consists within or is situated within our consciousness, right? That's one thing. So now you can look at reality itself in three ways from our personal experience. One is existence, that we can imagine existence all across the universe, and that's what's called Vishnu. Consciousness through which we experience this existence is Shiva, and the materiality, not materiality of the outside universe alone, but materiality of our own self, because we are also body, we are consciousness, but also the body in which this light falls, and that is the goddess. So that's where from this single, all-encompassing view of Parabrahma or Brahman, which is the cosmos, including us, including everything that there is, emerges in our mind's eye a triplicate enlargement or triplicate expression of it, and one is the the universe as it exists, and then the second is our consciousness through which we see it, and third is the goddess. Now, how to then go from our experience, the primal awareness that we have, to this light, because this experience of ours is veiled, as I said, through a variety of factors. One is the temperament that we are born with, because we are also the product of our genes, and that comes with certain veiling, and then the way we are raised, and then the way we fall into certain habits, and so which are like blinkers. So we only see things the way we are comfortable saying things. So then the whole question, the worship of the goddess, for example, is to turn in and to get these layers of veils off, so that you are one with that light, which is when you can, with Adi Shankaracharya, speak of that you are not your mano buddhi ahankara chittani naham. You're not your manas, your buddhi, your ahankar, or your chitta, but you are the light, the Atman, the Shiva within you. So now, personally, I think that it all hangs together. It's perfectly consistent with all of science, because now, of course, those in the West, well, I probably didn't complete the thread related to why have Western scholars gotten it wrong? Almost everybody. Why have they gotten it wrong? They're not. They're also trying their best. They're trying to be as, most of them trying to be as honest to their task. They get it wrong because their intuition is attached to this idea of consciousness emerging from the mind, while the heart of the Veda is this vision, or this perspective, which I think is perfectly scientific, because, as I said, we can prove that consciousness cannot be a product of the mind, product of the body, which is really what the Brahma Sutras or the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita also say. So, if it's not a product of the mind, this is fundamental. This is the fundamental reality in which all of reality, all the physical reality is suspended. But this consciousness is not only transcendent beyond space and time, it's also immanent. It's also within each one of us. And in fact, this is what Parikshit ji was talking about, how Agni or Jala or Vayu, they are all interpenetrating. In fact, there is a famous dialogue in the Brihad Aranyak Upanishad between Gargi and Yajnavalkya, where Yajnavalkya explains to Gargi that all the bhutas are oth-prot, that they are entangled with each other. And what does it really mean? First of all, the way we look at the details of how the mind works in the Vedic system is that, okay, you have the 25 tattvas of the Sankhya system. Now, the Vedas also say that you have 11 Rudras, and Rudras are the veilings or unveilings of consciousness. So taken together, in the Vedic system itself, you have 36. Now, 36 tattvas. Now, in the Vedas, these tattvas are elements of experience, as we know, and 24 of the 25 of Sankhya are related to Prakriti and its emanations, including our senses and your manas, buddhi, ahankar. And these then, within us, because we are Prakriti, within us the mind works in a hierarchical sense, although where all the layers are also interpenetrating in a counterintuitive way. And these are the 5 koshas: the Annamaya kosha, which is our body; the Pranamaya kosha, which are the various processes going on within our body; the Manomaya kosha, which is the mind. And what is the mind normally? A mind is memories. You know, what do we do normally? Most of the time, we, just as when we are on the internet, we go from one site to another. Likewise, when we are not on the internet, when we are on the internet of our mind, we go from one memory or one thought to another, right? So it's only a collection of memories. That's what mind is. But above that is buddhi, which is the Vijnanamaya kosha, which is the intellect. And so the intellect can be trained through education, through experience, through introspection. But above the intellect is ahankar. And ahankar is a kind of a dark box, and you can call it the unconscious, if one wanted to draw parallels with other schools of thought. And that's where it's much harder. That is our Karan Sharir, which is what makes us do things in specific ways. And that is something that we are born with. And that's why ordinarily we are not able to look within this module of ahankar, this kosha. This is the Anandamaya kosha of ahankar, which hides our true self from us, because our true self is beyond ahankar, which is where the Atman comes in. This is the model. And in this model, then, or in this particular view, since the Atman interpenetrates all of reality. It interpenetrates not only the Anandamaya Kosha, the Vijnanamaya Kosha, the Manomaya Kosha, the Pranamaya Kosha, and the Annamaya Kosha. Therefore, you can, by studying any of these koshas, also obtain a lot of insight. However, to completely view that light in all its glory, you have to sort of open up that ahankar within you, that aspect of yourself where your ahankar is hidden, and which is where your aham is, which is where your sense of your experienced self is, which is what constitutes your experience as a jiva. The Vedas always insist that the Atman and Brahman are the same, the Jivatma and the Paramatma are the same, but in our normal experience, the Jiva is different from Paramatma, because in our normal experience, we are constrained by the many parameters that we must be guided by. Now, in Mandukya Upanishad, we are told of the four states of awareness: Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, and Turiya. So, in the Jagrat Avastha, we are guided by our normal waking experience of physical reality. Because now the question might be asked, what is consciousness? What is this awareness? Now, this awareness is perhaps the witness. That's one way. Hey, there are two cells, like the two birds of the Rig Veda, or the Upanishads. There are two cells within you. One is, who is the Jivatma? Hey, I'm doing this, or I want this, or worried about this or the other. The other is the detached self within, who you are able to, in some moments, have a conversation. Now, this idea of the two selves, of course, is also in the parable of the chariot, or Krishna and Arjuna, or the senses are the horses, the reins are the mind, and you have Jivatma, who is Arjuna, who's doing all the action, and you have Paramatma, who's Krishna, who is your Atman, right? Who's sort of detached, who's guiding you, if you let yourself be guided. So this sort of explains everything, hangs together scientifically. That's what I want to emphasize. It hangs together, because the question that may be asked, even in the normal scientific conversation, is, where does freedom, the individual freedom come in? Because just as the Vedas say, there is rhythm, there are laws, and from rhythm comes ritu, seasons. Everything is by law. You have laws of science which undergird all unfoldments. Everything, whether it's conceptual or physical, should be determined completely by its past and its history. And if that is so, where does our freedom come in? Or do we have freedom at all? And this is, of course, something that is completely confused and befuddled Western scholars. And in fact, one view that's been pushed around is that that we are all zombies, that there are traces in our mind of our experience, but in reality we have no freedom, and so all that unfolds is completely determined by the past, and really you have no choice if you accept, as you should, that everything is by law. Because if there wasn't if everything was not unfolding by the law, then there is chaos. Now, where is the resolution that the Vedas provide us? Because the Vedas do provide us a resolution. The Vedas tell us that there is only one Atman. And in fact, my recent paper in Journal of AI and Consciousness, where I prove a theorem which I call the one observer theorem. Mathematically, one can prove that there is only one observer, and that means there is one Atman. If there's one Atman, then where multiplicity comes from is our not identifying with that Atman and being totally governed by actions which are a part of a causal chain. And therefore, you don't have freedom. And that's where the understanding of the whole idea of karmic chain comes in. We don't have freedom until such time that we are able to go to the source of light within us, which is prakasha, and this prakasha is another name for Shiva, for example, in the Shaivite tradition. So once you are in line with that, then you are a part of a cosmic unfoldment, as in Cain Upanishad. If you think you are doing it, then you're not doing it. Only if you think you're not doing it, then you are a part of this whole unfoldment, because there is only one consciousness. So, in other words, all of us, every human being, and all animals as well, are expressing this consciousness, this one Atma, and that is the very heart of Vedas. And this is so subtle that scholars who approach reality from the intuition of materiality, where consciousness is an emergent phenomenon, find it very difficult to get it. And all that it requires is a change in perspective. And that's why you can talk of chamatkar or epiphany associated with this understanding or with this enlightenment. This enlightenment is just a shift of perspective. And the moment you shift that perspective, you are free. That's when you are born again. That is what Punarjanman is. Punarjanma is not the end of the physical life chain, but rather at that moment when you have been set free, because then of course you can come back to your normal sanskaras when you are a part of this world. But this is what a Jivan Mukta is. Jivan Mukta is one who is free because this person is aware of that person's true self being his Atman. And as we see, then we can understand not only how societies function or how minds can go into states of delusion, which is moha and mada. Mada is false pride, which is what, for example, is happening in the Western Academy. This whole idea of intersectionality, that you are nothing but your physical life story related not only just to your person, but also to your ancestors based on the color of your skin. And therefore, all that you should see must be viewed only through this lens. And just imagine professors who've done critical thinking, or who one would assume had done logic or used logic, have bought into it. So in other words, mind can so very easily be led astray. And once it's led astray, moham and madam, moha and mad. So when it's led astray, you are completely in control, or you're completely controlled by thoughts or ideas, by ideology. And that's what the prison is. And this Atman is the absolute, is the referent. Mind can have different contents, and those contents can take you in one direction or the other, because these contents of the mind, in the chitta, for example, are stories, and we attach ourselves to stories. and we are totally guided with them. In fact, not just us, we are not different from um, our pets, for example. And I mentioned this before. When you go to a mall and you go to a pet store, you'll see these dogs in cages, and each of those dogs will completely beseechingly look into your eyes. They want to be adopted because you represent a story for them. And if you adopt them, they totally buy into your story, whatever you do, whatever you want them to do. So are human beings. As we are born, we want to get connected to stories, and those are the stories that are given to us um, in our upbringing. And that's why if these stories are not good, they can lead you to asuric life, or the life of a rakshasic life, or you can do horrible things. The same child who had the potential to become divine, div means light, divinity, go to divinity, become divine, be creative, uh, chooses the wrong path, because that wrong path is the path of the mind. Mind by itself has no capacity to be free. Mind by itself is tied into one storyline, to one experience of pashuhood. In fact, there is a verse in the Rig Veda which says there are two kinds of pashus or animals, uh, quadrupeds, chatushpad or dvipad, quadrupeds or bipeds. Bipeds are humans. We are also pashu. And that's why if we see that light within us, which is why Shiva is also called Pashupati, he's the he's the Lord of the Pashus. But if we see that light, that's when we are set free. Now, I don't know how much of more time I have. I think spoken for about 30 minutes. And so I'll stop here. And or if you want me to speak further, I can do so as well.
And thank you, sir. Now I have a question for Subhash ji that has come from the audience, and I request a brief answer. So the question, I think, is right up your alley. It says, if Atma and Brahma are one, can it be proved using the material science of mathematics? And I want to tell the questioner that you have written a paper proving that there is only one witness, only one Atma. I remember your, mentioning it in your talk, but I believe I've also got a copy of your paper. But go ahead, please answer this question. Go ahead.
Good question. And this is something that's, of course, being discussed or debated in computer science circles, related to consciousness. How many consciousnesses? And if there are so many consciousnesses, how do they even talk to each other? You have multitude of questions. But the intuition behind why there can be only one consciousness is this. Supposing consciousness was a product of complexity. So you create a machine which becomes conscious. But now this machine can be made or can be a subpart of a larger machine, which in turn can be a subpart of an even larger machine. Then you come up with this contradiction that a conscious being has another conscious being who is a part of this person's or this being's consciousness, which is impossible, right? Which is a contradiction. You cannot, because consciousness by itself, it has integrity, is one. So this one cannot have something which is a part of it, because then the conscious agent would not be able to be free, because the conscious agent's freedom would be sort of negated by its own subpart, right? And so this is where it comes from, and I think this is how the traditional arguments in Vedanta also address this question. Now, I must also add something that I forgot to mention, that people have asked, how does the conscious world interact with the material world? Because if they are different, if consciousness is not a property of materiality, it's transcendent, it's something else. How do the two interact? And this question has also been asked within the framework of quantum mechanics. How does the observer uh, influence, or can they interact with each other? And my late friend, the great Indian Malayali physicist, George Sudarshan, and his student Misra, in the 1970s wrote a paper where they showed that just by observation, the experimenter can influence the unfolding of a quantum state. You don't have to interact with it. You can just observe it. By observation, you can control it. And of course, in Vedantic literature, exactly this has been mentioned for centuries, and this is called the Drishti Srishti Vada. The question was asked, well, if everything is according to Rita, why do you need Ishvara? Where does Ishvara come in at all? Why do you need him? The answer is that Ishvara, through his drishti, is able to do srishti. It's through drishti. The Ishvara doesn't have to do anything, doesn't have to actually become, come in a physical form, although can be embodied. Ishvara's Atman can be embodied in an individual, because we can become the medium for the Atma. Any individual can be. And so, according to Drishti Srishti Vada, it's the Drishti of the deity which does Srishti. And in fact, if any of you who's done Tantra, you would know that Sri Vidya, for example, in Sri Chakra, which is a representation of the cosmos, you have all these triangles, 43 of them, which represent embodied reality or represent the architecture of the mind. Now, within the center is a bindu, and that bindu represents Shiva, because that bindu is infinitesimal. And what it really means is, if you start looking for Shiva within embodied reality, you won't find it. It's always beyond, because anything that happens can be explained in terms of embodiments. So it's always beyond consciousness, because it's not material, it's transcendental, right? I hope I did answer your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Subhashi. Thank you. In fact, for that brilliant exposition. While you were speaking, I was reminded of an extraordinary evening I spent at the University of Texas at Austin, where I was a Harry Ransom Humanities Research Fellow. In the same room, we had the great Indian writer Raja Rao and Ilya Prigogine, the Nobel Prize winner in physics, and the would-be Nobel Prize winner, George Sudarshan. And Raja Rao, in his usual very dramatic way, said to both the physicists, he said, "Sir, do objects exist?" he said. And then George Sudarshan said, "If objects exist, who sees them?" And, and then Prigogine said, is there an object independent of the observer? So there were these three questions that were left dangling, and then the people went off to their cocktails, those who were inclined to that kind of spirit, and the rest of us were just left with these really very profound and Vedantic ruminations.